The morning of the funeral was quiet in a way that felt heavy, like the air itself was holding its breath. Dark clouds covered the sky, and a slow wind moved through the cemetery, brushing against black coats and bowed heads. She stood near the grave, her hands folded tightly in front of her, trying to stay strong. Her eyes were swollen from crying all night, but no more tears came. It felt as if her body had already used them all. Her father's coffin rested in the ground, surrounded by flowers from people who barely knew him. He had been a simple man, not famous or loud, but kind in a steady way. He worked hard, spoke softly, and always came home on time. To her, he had been everything. Her safe place, her guide, her only real family. Standing a few steps away was her stepmother. She wore dark sunglasses even though the sun was barely visible. Her face showed no sadness, no loss. She kept checking her phone, tapping her foot, clearly impatient for the day to be over. When someone came to offer condolences, she nodded politely, but quickly turned away, as if the words meant nothing to her. As the priest finished his final words, people slowly began to leave. Some offered gentle hugs to the young woman. Others whispered kind phrases like, "He was a good man," or "He loved you very much." She thanked them quietly, though her voice felt distant to her own ears. When the last handful of soil was placed over the grave, she felt something inside her break. This was real now. Her father was gone. There would be no more morning talks in the kitchen, no more advice given in calm, patient tones. The world suddenly felt much larger and much colder. The drive back to the house was silent. The stepmother sat in the front seat staring straight ahead. She did not ask if the young woman was okay. She did not say a single word about the man they had just buried. The silence was sharp, cutting deeper than any argument could. The house came into view. It was the same house she had grown up in, the place where every corner held a memory. Her father had painted the fence himself. He had fixed the roof after a storm. He had planted the tree in the backyard when she was just a child, saying it would grow as she did, as soon as they stepped inside. The stepmother removed her shoes and coat with quick, sharp movements. She walked straight into the living room and sat down, crossing her legs like someone settling into an office meeting. The young woman stood near the door, unsure of what to do. She still wore her black dress. Her head was spinning. Part of her wanted to go to her room, curl up on the bed, and disappear for a while. Instead, her stepmother cleared her throat. "We need to talk," she said, her voice calm but cold. The young woman looked up, surprised by the sudden seriousness. She slowly moved closer and sat on the edge of a chair. "I'll be direct," the stepmother continued. "Now that your father is gone, things are going to change." She waited, expecting words of comfort or at least some explanation. "This house belongs to me now," the stepmother said, "and I've decided it's best if you move out." The words did not make sense at first. They floated in the air, empty and confusing. "Move out," she repeated quietly. This is my home." The stepmother removed her sunglasses and finally looked at her. Her eyes were hard, without warmth. "Not anymore," she replied. "You're an adult. It's time you stand on your own." The young woman felt her chest tighten. "My father never said anything about this," she said. "He wanted me to stay here. We talked about it." The stepmother waved her hand as if brushing away dust. "Your father is gone. What he wanted no longer matters. I've handled the paperwork. There's nothing left for you here." Oh, those words hit harder than the loss itself. "Nothing?" she asked, her voice shaking. "He wouldn't do that." Stepmother stood up. "He did. And even if he didn't, I'm his wife. This house, the money, everything, it's mine now." She walked toward the hallway and pointed toward the stairs. "You can pack what you need. I want you out by tonight." The room felt like it was closing in. Her ears rang. She struggled to breathe. "But I have nowhere to go," she said softly. "That's not my problem," the stepmother replied. "Life is hard. You'll learn." With that, she turned and walked away, leaving the young woman frozen in place. Slowly, she made her way upstairs. Every step felt heavier than the last. Her room was exactly how she had left it that morning. Books on the shelf, a photo of her and her father smiling at the beach. She picked it up and pressed it to her chest, finally allowing herself to cry. She packed slowly, unsure of what to take and what to leave behind. Every item carried a memory. The sweater her father had bought her, the notebook where she wrote her dreams, the small wooden box he had carved by hand. Downstairs, she could hear her stepmother moving around, opening drawers, making phone calls. Already acting like the house was fully hers, by evening, her suitcase sat by the door. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the floor. She stood in the living room one last time, looking around. This house had been her whole world. Now it felt like a place that no longer wanted her. Her stepmother handed her a small envelope. "This should cover your expenses for a few days," she said flatly. She looked inside. There was barely any money. "Take care of yourself," the stepmother added. It's already turning away. The door closed behind her with a final sound that echoed in her chest. She stood on the porch for a moment, holding her suitcase, not knowing which direction to go. The night air was cold. Streetlights flickered on. Cars passed by, each one moving forward while she stood still. She took a deep breath and stepped off the porch, unaware that her father had left behind a truth far bigger than she could imagine, and that this painful ending was only the beginning. The first night outside her father's house was colder than she expected. She walked the streets with her small suitcase, unsure of where to go or who could help. Every familiar corner of the town seemed to mock her, reminding her of the life she had lost. The lights in the windows of passing houses felt distant and untouchable, as if they belonged to a world she could never enter. She eventually found herself in a small park, the swings moving slightly in the wind. She sat on a bench, placing her suitcase beside her. She rested her head on her hands, feeling the weight of everything she had lost pressing down on her. Her father's voice echoed in her mind, telling her that life could be hard, but she could always find a way forward. She wished he were there now to hold her hand, to tell her that this pain wouldn't last forever. The night passed slowly. She slept with her head on the suitcase, shivering occasionally from the cold. Early morning brought a pale light and a weak sun that struggled to break through the clouds. She felt tired, but hunger made her wake and move. She needed to find work, a place to stay, something that would give her a sense of control in a life that had suddenly been turned upside down. Her first stop was a small cafe. She had walked past countless times before. She had seen the staff inside, cheerful and busy, and thought maybe she could ask for a job. The manager looked at her carefully when she approached. A young woman in worn black clothes asking for work. But there was something about her eyes, something honest, sad, and determined that made him pause. "I can do anything," she said quietly. "Dishwashing, cleaning, serving, whatever you need." He studied her for a moment and then nodded. "Come back in an hour. I'll see what I can do." She spent that hour walking nearby streets, trying to make sense of the day ahead. People passed by with their busy lives, talking, laughing, carrying groceries, or heading to work. She felt invisible and exposed, but also strangely alive, as if this moment marked the beginning of a new chapter she hadn't chosen but had to live through. The cafe job was not glamorous. She washed dishes, swept floors, and sometimes ran small errands for the staff. But it was enough to give her a small sense of pride. For the first time since leaving the house, she felt she had a reason to wake up and keep moving forward. Each evening, she would return to a cheap hostel she could barely afford, grateful for the roof over her head, even if it was small, crowded, and cold. As weeks passed, she began to adapt. She learned to manage her money carefully, spending only what was necessary and saving a little when she could. She made friends among other workers, people who had known hardship in different forms and shared small acts of kindness with one another. Those friendships, though simple, became anchors in a life that had been suddenly uprooted. Yet, even as she learned to survive, she could not shake the feeling of loss. Every time she passed a home or saw a family laughing together, a sharp ache would hit her chest. She remembered her father's smile, the way he had tucked her in at night, the quiet talks they had shared about life and dreams. She missed him more than she could say. and the thought of her stepmother living comfortably in the house that should have been hers filled her with silent anger and confusion. She started to spend her evenings walking through parks or along quiet streets, letting her thoughts wander. Sometimes she would talk to herself, as if speaking aloud might bring some clarity. "I have to keep going," she would say softly. "I have to find a way." The words became a kind of mantra, a thread she could hold on to when the nights felt darkest. One evening, after a long day of work, she met a woman at the hostel who noticed her sadness. She was older, with gentle eyes and a warm smile, and she invited the young woman to sit and share some tea. They talked about simple things at first, the weather, the city, small stories about work, but soon the conversation moved to deeper subjects. The young woman shared her story, the loss, and the betrayal she had experienced. The woman listened quietly, nodding at the right moments, not interrupting, not judging. When she finished, the woman said, "Life can be unfair, but sometimes it prepares us for something better. You are stronger than you know. You just have to hold on to that strength, even when it feels like there's nothing left." Her words stayed with her as she walked back to the hostel. She realized that though the world had turned against her in some ways, there were still people who could care, who could offer kindness and guidance. That thought, small as it was, gave her a tiny spark of hope. Months passed. She began to take small steps toward independence. She rented a tiny room of her own with the little money she saved. It was modest, with peeling paint and a simple bed, but it was hers. She decorated it with small reminders of her father, a photograph, a small wooden carving he had made, and a few of her favorite books. It was not a home yet, but it was a start. Her work at the cafe grew. The manager noticed her reliability, her willingness to learn, and the quiet determination that guided her every action. She began to handle small customer orders, then larger responsibilities. Each success, no matter how small, built her confidence. She realized she could survive, even thrive, without relying on anyone else. Yet, despite the progress, she could not stop thinking about the house she had been forced to leave. Memories of childhood laughter, her father's gentle voice, and the security she once knew haunted her. She wondered what her stepmother was doing, how she had changed the place she called home. The thought made her stomach twist, but also strengthened her resolve to move forward, to create her own path rather than wait for someone to grant her a life she had been denied. Late one evening, as she returned from work, she found herself standing before the park where she had spent her first night outside her father's house. The swings moved gently in the breeze, the same as they had months ago. She sat down on the bench and let her thoughts drift. She realized that even though her father was gone, his lessons, his love, and his belief in her remained. They were intangible, but they were powerful enough to keep her moving forward. She made a decision that night. She would continue to build her life step by step, without bitterness, without giving up. She would honor her father by living, by proving that his care and love had not been in vain. She would survive, not just to exist, but to find her place, to claim her future, whatever it might hold. As the stars began to appear, one by one, she felt a quiet determination settle in her heart. The city around her moved on, unaware of the struggles of one young woman, but she knew her own story was just beginning. And though the path ahead was uncertain, she would walk it with courage, holding on to the strength her father had given her and the hope that life, in its own time, might still offer unexpected surprises. It had been several months since she had left her father's house. Each day had been a careful balancing act, juggling work at the cafe, managing her tiny room, and trying not to let the memories of her old life overwhelm her. She had learned to survive, but she had not forgotten. Some nights she would sit by her small window and think of her father's voice, his quiet advice, and the home she had been forced to leave. Each thought carried a mixture of sadness and determination. One afternoon, as she returned from work, she found a small envelope waiting for her outside the door of her room. It was unusual, neatly addressed, with a formal-looking seal. She picked it up carefully, turning it over in her hands. Her heart began to beat faster. Letters like this did not arrive for her. The envelope seemed to hum with a sense of importance. and a strange mix of fear and curiosity filled her chest. She sat on her bed, carefully breaking the seal. Inside was a letter on official-looking stationery. The handwriting was precise, clear, and unfamiliar, but the tone carried weight. She unfolded it slowly, reading each line carefully. The letter explained that it had been sent by a law firm handling her father's estate. Her father had set up a specific clause in his will, one that could only be revealed after his passing. The letter stated that she was to come in person to discuss the details of the inheritance. There was a date and a time, and the lawyer had assured discretion and a safe environment for her visit. Her hands shook slightly as she read. An inheritance? She had been told by her stepmother that there was nothing left for her. The house and all belongings were now fully under her stepmother's control. The letter challenged everything she had been led to believe. A small, cautious hope began to stir in her heart. Could it be true? Could her father have planned this, even knowing his wife's coldness and her own vulnerability? The days leading up to the appointment were filled with restless thoughts. She walked through the city streets, letting her mind wander. What could her father have left her? Money? Property? Something she couldn't even imagine. She remembered her father's quiet ways, the careful way he managed his life, the patience in his actions. He had always been thoughtful, and the idea that he had arranged something to protect her even after his death brought both relief and disbelief. When the day finally arrived, she dressed carefully in clothes that were neat but simple. She did not want to appear careless or unprepared. She carried the envelope in her hand like a fragile treasure. As she approached the law firm, a sense of nervous anticipation built in her chest. She had never been to such a place, and the polished floors, neat furniture, and quiet professionalism made her feel both out of place and oddly safe. The lawyer, a middle-aged man with calm eyes and a reassuring manner, greeted her politely. He invited her into a quiet office and offered her a seat. She felt a mixture of fear and excitement, unsure what to expect. He handed her another letter and an envelope, explaining that this contained the details of her father's wishes. Her hands trembled as she opened it. Inside were legal documents, detailed and formal, outlining her father's estate. She read carefully. Her eyes widened as she discovered the truth. Her father had left her not only the family home, but also a significant investment account. Carefully hidden and protected from anyone who might try to claim it, the documents explained that he had anticipated the stepmother's behavior and had taken legal measures to ensure that she could not access the property or funds meant for his. Daughter tears welled up in her eyes, a mixture of relief, gratitude, and disbelief. The house she had been forced out of, the place where she had grown up, the space filled with her father's love, it was hers by right. The money, which she had never imagined could exist, would give her security and the means to build a life of her own. Her father had planned for her safety, for her independence, in a way that no one else could have imagined. The lawyer explained the next steps. She would need to provide some identification, and a few minor legal formalities would follow. Once completed, she would have full control over the property and assets. The process was designed to be discreet, to protect her from her stepmother's interference, and to ensure her security. The lawyer's calm explanation made her realize how carefully her father had thought of everything. It was almost as if he had known the challenges she would face and had quietly laid a path for her to reclaim her life as she left the office. The sun was beginning to set, casting warm light over the city streets. She held the documents close to her chest, a tangible connection to her father's foresight and love. The weight of the past months, the struggle, and the uncertainty suddenly felt lighter. She could breathe, even if only a little, knowing that the future might hold something different, something hopeful. Walking back to her small room, she began to imagine what life could be like. The house she had been forced to leave, the memories trapped within its walls, would now be hers. She thought of restoring it, bringing it back to life, and maybe even creating a space where she could honor her father's memory and live freely. The possibilities seemed endless, and for the first time in months, she felt a spark of excitement mingled with cautious optimism. That night, she lay awake, thinking about what the next steps would be. She thought about her stepmother, who had so confidently cast her out, and the justice that seemed to be quietly unfolding. She did not feel anger. Not entirely. She felt a sense of clarity, recognition that her father's love and planning had outlasted the cruelty and indifference she had faced. She realized that life could be unfair, but sometimes patience and perseverance revealed truths that could change everything. In the following days, she met with the lawyer again, signed the necessary papers, and began the process of reclaiming the house and her inheritance. Each step was carefully guided, and she felt supported not only by the law, but by the invisible hand of her father's care. With every signature, every document, the reality of her situation became clearer. She was no longer powerless. She had a future that was legally, irrevocably hers. While the world around her moved on, she began to plan quietly. She thought about returning to the house, not in anger, but with purpose. She thought about the memories she wanted to preserve, the repairs that would need attention, and the chance to create a home where she could feel safe again. Her mind buzzed with ideas, plans, and hopes, and for the first time in months, she felt fully alive. The discovery of the letter and the inheritance had changed everything. It had turned despair into hope, confusion into clarity, and loss into opportunity. She realized that her father's love and wisdom had protected her even after he was gone. The challenges she had faced were real, but they had not defined her. Now armed with truth, guidance, and a newfound strength, she could step into a future that was entirely her own. That night, as she placed the documents in a safe place, she whispered a quiet thank you to her father. His presence, though no longer physical, was stronger than ever in the guidance, protection, and love that had reached beyond his life. She slept with a sense of peace and anticipation, ready to face the next chapter, knowing that the path he had prepared would lead her to reclaim her life and her home. The day she returned to the house she had once called home was filled with a mix of excitement and nervousness. The streets leading to it looked familiar, yet distant, as if they had been waiting for her arrival. She held the documents from the lawyer tightly in her hands, feeling a sense of power and justice that had been missing for so long. She had imagined this moment countless times, but reality felt different, heavier, and yet strangely comforting. When she reached the front gate, it looked just the same. The paint on the gate was slightly chipped, and the garden had grown wild in her absence. The house itself seemed to stand patiently, waiting for her return. She hesitated for a moment before opening the gate, taking a deep breath to calm the whirlwind of emotions in her chest. As soon as she stepped onto the porch, she heard the familiar sound of doors opening inside. Her stepmother appeared, clearly surprised to see her standing there with such confidence. The smug expression that had been so common on her face faltered for just a moment, replaced by a hint of concern. "What are you doing here?" the stepmother asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "You're not supposed to be back." She held up the documents from the lawyer. "I am, the house, and everything else are mine, by my father's wishes. You have no claim here." Stepmother's eyes widened, but she quickly masked her surprise with anger. "That's impossible," she said sharply. "Your father would never, they would never leave me nothing." She finished for her, her voice calm but firm. "It doesn't matter what you think. The law is clear." Her stepmother's hands trembled slightly as she crossed her arms. She had always relied on control and intimidation, but now she faced the reality that it no longer worked. The power dynamic had shifted, and for the first time, she seemed unsure. The young woman took a careful step forward. She did not come with anger or vengeance in her heart, but with clarity and a quiet determination. "I'm not here to fight," she said softly. "I just want what is rightfully mine, what my father wanted me to have." The stepmother looked around, realizing that she could not simply kick her out this time. The documents in the young woman's hands were undeniable proof, carefully prepared and legally binding. There was no room for argument, no way to twist the situation in her favor. After a long pause, she nodded curtly. "Fine," she said, her voice cold but controlled. "You win. But don't think this changes everything so easily. You don't know what you're walking into." The young woman didn't respond. She had anticipated this, and she knew that her stepmother's words were meant to intimidate, to make her second-guess herself. She took a deep breath and stepped inside. Finally reclaiming the home she had been denied for so long, the rooms were filled with memories, both joyful and painful. She walked slowly, letting her fingers brush against familiar surfaces. The walls held echoes of laughter, of quiet conversations with her father, and of moments of simple happiness. Each room was a reminder of what had been lost, but now also of what had been preserved and protected by her father's foresight. She made her way to the living room, where the stepmother had settled for years as if she owned the place. The young woman placed the documents on the table, quiet but firm reminder of the legal truth. "I'm giving you time to collect your things," she said, her voice steady. "You need to leave the house. Everything here is mine, just as my father intended." The stepmother looked around, realizing that her authority was gone. She had relied on fear and manipulation, but those tools no longer held power. Slowly, she began to gather her belongings, her movements stiff and deliberate. The young woman watched quietly, feeling no triumph or malice, only a sense of closure. This was not about revenge. It was about justice, about reclaiming what had always been hers. As the days passed, she began to restore the house. She cleaned, repaired, and organized, bringing life back to spaces that had been neglected. Each action was a reminder of her father's love and foresight. She found small treasures he had left behind, a note tucked in a drawer, a photograph in a frame, a small wooden carving he had made. Each item carried a piece of his memory, a reminder that even though he was gone, his care and planning had reached beyond his life to protect her. The neighborhood watched quietly. People who had known her family for years noticed the young woman's return and the changes that came with it. Some offered small acts of kindness, helping with repairs or bringing over food. Others watched in surprise as the stepmother's influence faded, unable to maintain the control she had once wielded as she settled into the house. She realized that the inheritance was more than just property and money. It was a symbol of resilience, of her father's love, and of the power of patience and perseverance. The legal documents had secured her future, but it was her courage and determination that allowed her to step fully into it. Her stepmother eventually left. Moving into a small apartment in the city, she tried to maintain appearances, but the shift in power in the young woman's quiet confidence had left a lasting impact. The house, once a place of exclusion and cruelty, now became a sanctuary of memory, security, and new beginnings. She spent her evenings walking through the garden, tending to plants that had grown wild and reflecting on the journey that had brought her here. The struggles, the loneliness, and the uncertainty had not been easy, but they had prepared her for this moment. She understood now that life could be unfair, but truth and love had a way of finding their path. Friends she had made during her months of struggle came to visit, sharing stories, laughter, and support. She began to see that life, even after betrayal and loss, could offer moments of joy and connection. The house became a hub of quiet activity, a place where kindness and resilience were nurtured. She thought often of her father, imagining his quiet smile and the satisfaction he must have felt knowing that she was safe and that his planning had worked. She whispered small thank yous to him in the quiet moments, feeling his presence in the careful restoration of the house, in the stability she was creating, and in the sense of justice that had finally been realized. The inheritance twist had changed everything. It had turned despair into hope, powerlessness into security, and loneliness into opportunity. She realized that her father's love had not been limited by his life. It had extended beyond it, guiding and protecting her in ways she had never expected. The house was hers, the memories intact, and her future filled with possibilities that were now truly her own. In the weeks and months that followed, she continued to rebuild her life, making careful plans, pursuing new opportunities, and nurturing the connections she had formed. The stepmother's absence left space for growth, reflection, and the quiet joy of reclaiming a home that had always been hers. She knew that challenges would still arise, but the foundation her father had laid, combined with her own strength, gave her the confidence to face them every day. She walked through the rooms with a sense of ownership and peace. She knew that life could be unpredictable and unfair, but she had seen firsthand that preparation, love, and resilience could overcome even the harshest obstacles. The inheritance was more than legal documents. It was a testament to her father's wisdom and the power of quiet, enduring care. And as she stood in the living room one evening, watching the sunlight spill across the floor, she understood fully that this moment, this house, and this life were hers to cherish, protect, and grow. The inheritance twist had not just given her a home, it had given her back herself, and with it, the chance to create a future guided by her father's love and her own courage. The house was quiet, filled with memories and the faint scent of old wood and flowers from the garden she had begun to tend. For the first time in months, she felt a sense of belonging and peace. It was not just the walls or the rooms that made it feel like home. It was the life she had worked so hard to reclaim, and the love that had guided her from beyond her father's life. She spent her mornings walking through the garden, pruning overgrown plants, planting new flowers, and feeling the soil in her hands. Each action, small and deliberate, brought a sense of calm and accomplishment. The garden, once wild and neglected, was slowly becoming a symbol of growth and resilience. She imagined her father watching, pleased that she was caring for the home and the life he had wanted for her. Inside the house, she moved carefully from room to room, restoring furniture, repairing small damages, and placing meaningful objects in their rightful places. A photo of her father on the mantelpiece, the wooden carving he had made, and her childhood drawings brought life back to the rooms. Every corner was filled with memories, but also with the promise of the future. Despite the peace that had settled over her, she still carried the weight of the months she had spent alone, struggling to survive. Some nights, when the house was silent, she would sit by the window and remember the streets she had walked, the cheap hostel rooms, and the uncertainty that had defined her life for so long. She understood now that those experiences had made her stronger, teaching her resilience, patience, and the value of small acts of courage. Her friends from the cafe and the hostel visited often. They shared meals, laughter, and stories of their own lives. Their presence reminded her that family could be chosen, that support could be found in unexpected places, and that life was about connection as much as it was about independence. She welcomed their visits, sharing the warmth and comfort of her reclaimed home with those who had offered kindness when she needed it most. She also began to reflect on her stepmother's role in her journey. At first, anger had burned in her chest, a reaction to the betrayal and exclusion she had faced. But as time passed, she realized that anger would not serve her. Her father's love, the inheritance he had carefully prepared, and her own determination had created a path forward. She decided to let go of resentment, understanding that her stepmother's actions could not diminish the life her father had envisioned for her. With this clarity, she focused on building a future that honored her father's memory. She made plans to continue working and saving, investing her inheritance wisely and creating a life of stability and growth. She thought about helping others who might be facing hardship, offering support in the same quiet, steady way her father had taught her. The idea of giving back, of creating positive change, brought a sense of purpose she had never felt before. The community around her began to notice the transformation. Neighbors who had once seen her as the quiet daughter of a simple man now saw her as a woman of strength and independence. They respected her resilience, admired her dedication to restoring the house, and recognized the quiet wisdom she carried. She welcomed their acknowledgement without arrogance, understanding that true growth came from humility and persistence. One afternoon, while organizing the living room, she found a small envelope tucked behind a photo frame. Inside was a note in her father's handwriting. It was simple, yet filled with love and encouragement. He wrote about his pride in her, his belief in her strength, and his hope that she would continue to live with integrity and kindness. She held the note close, feeling his presence in a way that was both comforting and inspiring. The words reminded her that love could transcend time and circumstance. That guidance could be felt even when someone was no longer physically present, as the weeks turned into months. She continued to make the house her own. She painted the walls in warm colors, replaced worn furniture, and added personal touches that reflected her personality and values. The home became a sanctuary, a place where she could rest, reflect, and plan for the future. Every morning she awoke with a sense of purpose, grateful for the life she had fought to reclaim and the opportunities that lay ahead. Her relationships with friends deepened. She shared meals, celebrated small victories, and supported each other through challenges. These connections brought joy, laughter, and comfort, reinforcing the idea that family was not just defined by blood, but by love, trust, and mutual care. She realized that her father had given her not only material security, but also the freedom to create meaningful bonds in a life filled with warmth. The house, once a place of exclusion and heartbreak, had become a symbol of resilience, hope, and new beginnings. She walked through its rooms with pride, knowing that every step she had taken, every challenge she had faced, had led her to this moment. She had reclaimed not only a physical space, but also her sense of self, her confidence, and her ability to shape her own destiny. She often thought about the lessons she had learned. Life could be harsh and unfair, but patience, determination, and the support of those who truly cared could overcome even the most difficult circumstances. Her father's love had been her guiding light, and she had honored it by persevering in creating a life of dignity and purpose. As she stood in the garden one evening, watching the sun set and the flowers swaying gently in the breeze, she felt a deep sense of peace. The future was still uncertain in many ways, but she knew that she was ready for whatever came next. She had faced betrayal, loss, and hardship, and emerged stronger, wiser, and more compassionate. The journey had not been easy, but it had shaped her into the person she was meant to be. She understood that life's true inheritance was not just wealth or property, but the strength, resilience, and love that allowed one to face challenges, overcome obstacles, and build a meaningful life. Her father's gift had extended far beyond material wealth. It had been the lesson of courage, patience, and hope with each passing day. She continued to restore not just the house, but herself. She nurtured her dreams, embraced her independence, created a life that reflected both her father's wisdom and her own spirit. The home had become a place of healing, a space where she could grow, dream, and find joy. In quiet moments, she would sit by the window or in the garden, reflecting on the journey that had brought her here. She felt gratitude for the challenges that had tested her, for the kindness of friends who had supported her, and for the love of a father who had thought ahead to protect her. She knew that her life was now hers to shape, guided by the lessons of the past and the promise of the future. And as she closed her eyes at night, she felt a profound sense of closure. The betrayal, the loss, and the hardship had been part of her journey, but they did not define her. What defined her was her courage, her resilience, and the love that had carried her through the darkest moments. She had reclaimed her home, her inheritance, and most importantly, herself. The story that had begun with loss and betrayal had ended with healing, growth, and the quiet triumph of love, patience, and perseverance. She knew that life would continue to bring challenges, but she was ready. The house, the memories, and the life her father had carefully protected were now hers to nurture, cherish, and build upon. She had not only survived, she had flourished, and in doing so, she had honored the deepest lessons of love, courage, and hope that her father had left behind. Life had settled into a quiet rhythm in the house she had reclaimed. Yet a part of her still felt the pull of unanswered questions. Even after months of restoration, of tending to the garden, and of rebuilding her life, she felt there was more to discover about her father's plans and the legacy he had left behind. The house was full of memories and secrets, and one ordinary afternoon, she stumbled upon something that would once again change everything. She had been cleaning the attic, a dusty space she had avoided for years. Boxes of old belongings, forgotten furniture, and childhood memorabilia filled the room. As she moved a particularly heavy chest to make room for organizing, a small envelope slipped out from beneath it. She picked it up, her hands trembling slightly. There was no name on it, no address, only a wax seal she did not recognize. Curiosity and caution warred inside her. She broke the seal slowly, revealing a letter in handwriting she knew well, her father's. Her heart raced as she unfolded the paper, unsure of what she might find. The letter began with familiar words of love, pride, and encouragement. But as she read further, her eyes widened. The letter revealed a hidden detail of her father's estate, one that had not been mentioned in any of the previous legal documents. He had left a portion of his property in trust, tied to a condition she had never imagined. A distant relative, someone she had never met, had been entrusted with overseeing it until she reached a certain age and proved she was ready. Her father's foresight had gone far beyond what she had discovered before. It was both exhilarating and overwhelming. The inheritance she had claimed months ago had been only part of a much larger plan. Her father had carefully considered not just her immediate security, but her long-term growth, her independence, and her ability to make wise choices. She felt a deep sense of gratitude and awe at the meticulous planning and love that had guided every step of his posthumous care. A letter also contained instructions on how to contact the trustee and claim the remaining portion of the estate. She could feel the weight of responsibility in every line. This was not just about property or money. It was about trust, character, and the ability to carry forward the values her father had instilled in her. She realized that her journey of resilience had prepared her for this moment in ways she had not fully understood until now. Determined to follow her father's instructions, she reached out to the trustee, a quiet, thoughtful man who had been entrusted with safeguarding her father's legacy. Their first meeting was formal, but it quickly turned into a discussion about her father's vision and the values he had hoped she would carry forward. He spoke of her father's care, his strategic thinking, and the belief he had in her abilities and judgment. Over the next few days, she learned more about the hidden portion of her father's estate. It included investments, properties, and even small businesses he had nurtured quietly over the years. Each piece had been chosen to ensure her growth, independence, and stability. Her father had anticipated challenges she might face, the potential for interference from others, and had designed the estate to empower her while protecting her from harm. This revelation brought a new sense of purpose. She realized that her life was not just about surviving or reclaiming what had been taken from her. It was about embracing responsibility, making wise decisions, and continuing the legacy of integrity and care her father had left behind. She felt a renewed energy, a drive to not only manage what was hers, but to grow, nurture, and create opportunities that would honor his vision as she worked to integrate the newly discovered assets. She began reaching out to people who had been part of her father's life in various ways. Some were old friends, business associates, and community members who had respected him deeply. They offered guidance, support, and insight into his careful planning. And she felt a sense of connection that extended beyond her immediate family. It was as if her father's presence was guiding her steps, surrounding her with a network of trust and wisdom. During this period, she also began to explore her own ambitions. She had always dreamed of creating something meaningful, of contributing positively to the lives of others. The additional resources her father had left opened doors she had never imagined. She could invest in education, community projects, and initiatives that aligned with the values he had instilled in her. Each decision was made with careful thought, reflecting both gratitude for his guidance and a desire to live with purpose. One evening, as she walked through the garden, she reflected on the journey that had brought her here. From the painful days of being cast out to the careful restoration of her home, and now to the discovery of this hidden portion of her father's estate, she understood the depth of his love and foresight. Every challenge had prepared her for this moment, teaching resilience, patience, and wisdom. She also reflected on her relationship with her stepmother, who had faded from her life after the inheritance twist. Though anger and resentment had once occupied her thoughts, she now understood that holding on to those feelings would only weigh her down. She chose forgiveness, not for the stepmother's sake, but for her own peace and growth. Letting go allowed her to focus on the future, on the opportunities and responsibilities that lay ahead. The days grew busy as she managed her expanding estate. Each property, each investment required attention, care, and decision-making. She embraced the challenge, learning quickly, seeking advice when needed, and relying on her own judgment and intuition. Her confidence grew, not from wealth or power, but from understanding that she was capable, resilient, and guided by her father's enduring love. Amidst all this, she continued to nurture the personal aspects of her life. Friends visited, shared meals, and celebrated milestones. The house became a hub of warmth and connection, a place where memories of her past coexisted with plans for the future. She felt a profound sense of fulfillment, knowing that she had not only survived her father's loss, but had flourished in ways he had envisioned. One quiet evening, as she sat by the fireplace, she reread the letter that had revealed the hidden inheritance. Her eyes lingered on the words of love, guidance, and trust. She realized that her father had given her far more than property or money. He had given her confidence, resilience, the understanding that she could navigate life's challenges with integrity and grace. His foresight had created a roadmap for her life, guiding her beyond grief, beyond betrayal, and into empowerment. She smiled softly, feeling a sense of completion, yet recognizing that her journey was ongoing. The hidden inheritance had revealed not just material assets, but a deeper truth about life, responsibility, and the enduring power of love. She felt ready to embrace the future fully, to honor her father's memory through her actions, decisions, the life she continued to build. The discovery also inspired her to document her journey. She began writing about her experiences, the lessons she had learned, and the strength she had found within herself. She hoped that by sharing her story, she could offer encouragement and guidance to others facing loss, betrayal, or uncertainty. Her father's foresight had not only shaped her life, but now had the potential to inspire others as well. As the months went by, she continued to grow both personally and professionally. She invested wisely, nurtured her properties, and engaged with her community in meaningful ways. The house remained a sanctuary, a place of reflection, memory, and action. Each day brought new challenges and opportunities, and she approached them with a sense of purpose and gratitude. She understood that life was unpredictable, that challenges would continue to arise. But she also knew that she had the tools, the strength, and the guidance to navigate them. Her father's hidden inheritance had taught her patience, resilience, and the value of foresight. It had reinforced the lessons she had learned through hardship and had prepared her for the responsibilities and opportunities that lay ahead in quiet moments. She would walk through the garden, feeling the sun on her face and the breeze in her hair, reflecting on the journey that had brought her to this point. She felt a profound sense of peace and fulfillment, knowing that she had honored her father's legacy, reclaimed her home, and embraced the life he had envisioned for her. And as she looked toward the future, she understood that her journey was not just about reclaiming what was hers, but about living with purpose, integrity, and love. The unexpected revelation had changed everything, but it had also shown her the depth of her father's care and the power of resilience, patience, and hope. She was ready for whatever came next, guided by the lessons of the past and the promise of a future filled with possibility.